The signal they shouldn't have sent. The stars were quiet that day. Almost too quiet. Above Earth, satellites spun in their usual orbit, collecting dust and data. But far beyond Pluto's shadow, something new had arrived. A ship, dark and sharp, like a blade, hovered silently in the void. It was not human, not built by Earth, not registered by any known scanner. It came from a place humans had never seen, and it carried a message humans were never supposed to hear. Inside the ship, Varnok Commander Riltor adjusted his armor plates. He looked at the holographic image of Earth Blue, calm, unsuspecting. Our analysts say the humans are emotional, scattered, unprepared, his second-in-command reported. Riltor clicked his teeth together, a sign of amusement in his species. Then it will be fun. He said, "Send the signal." A deep pulse shot through the galaxy, carried on compressed energy waves. The message was simple and brutal. To the people of Earth, it said, "You now belong to the Varnok Dominion. You will submit, or you will be erased. There will be no negotiations, no second. Warnings, no mercy." Then the signal ended, leaving only silence behind. The Varnok ship turned and left just as quickly as it had arrived. It didn't wait for a reply. It didn't expect one, because in their minds, Earth was weak, a primitive world still learning to walk. They believed they were teachers of fear, masters of war, but they had just made the greatest mistake of their species. They had spoken to Earth as if it was still asleep. They didn't know Earth had already woken up, and it had been preparing for this moment for a very, very long time. Deep beneath Greenland's ice shelf, in a black site bunker called Vault. Echo, alarms began to hum. Not sirens, not panic, just a calm voice repeating. Code Revenant activated. Screens lit up, showing the alien signal, translating it word by word. One man stood alone in the cold command room, sipping black coffee. His name was Director Hal Mason, and he had been waiting for this signal for 26 years. He didn't call the president, didn't contact the UN. Instead, he turned to a locked panel and placed his hand on a scanner. The screen lit green, then red, then white. Then the words appeared. Project Protocol. Revenant unsealed, somewhere near Mars. An old human ship went dark. No one saw it move. No thrusters fired. No signal was sent. But it vanished from orbit like a ghost slipping into water. Its name was UNS Fury's Echo, and it hadn't moved in 15 years. Until now, in orbit above Earth, the International Peace Grid detected the Varnok signal. Top-level generals met in virtual chambers. Most argued, some shouted, one even laughed nervously. But it was General Lee Voss who silenced them all. She leaned forward and said, "If they wanted a response, they just got it." She pulled up a restricted file, locked under Global Contingency Omega, and read aloud. If alien life initiates a hostile first contact scenario, execute the manual. Far away, on a desert moon humans had never claimed, a small drone lit up. It had no weapon, no engine, just a single transmitter. And from that transmitter came a single human voice. "This is not a surrender," the voice said, calm and cold. "This is not a warning. This is a lesson." In the Varnok Empire, the High Council received Earth's silence as insult. They laughed, unaware of what was now moving in the dark. "Primitive apes think they can ignore us." One elder hissed, "Let them." Another said, "We will burn their oceans." But even their ships, their data cores, their deep-range scanners, none could detect the shape of what was coming. Because Earth had not just prepared weapons, it had written doctrines, algorithms, responses, deceptions. It had written the manual on war, and now the first chapter was being opened. Captain Raze sat inside an old training simulator in a forgotten military hangar. He hadn't worn a uniform in 10 years, but as the signal played again on the screen, in front of him, he smiled. "They finally spoke," he whispered. "Fools." Behind him, Soldiers entered silently. Old comrades, silent and ready. The past was no longer past. The war hadn't just started. It had been waiting, and now Earth would teach them what war truly meant. Meet the ones who wrote the manual. They called him Raze, but that wasn't his real name. His real name had been erased from every database, every war file, every satellite backup, not to protect him, but to protect everyone else from what he knew. He wasn't a general anymore, not officially. Now he worked in a scrapyard on a floating station near Saturn, fixing old metal like it was his therapy. He lived among rust, silence, and regret, but deep inside, he never stopped listening for the one signal he feared, and hoped he'd hear again. When it came, he didn't flinch. The voice echoed through a private com implanted behind his left ear. A voice he hadn't heard in 15 years. "This is Echo Command," it said. "The manual is open." Raze slowly stood from the workbench, brushed dust off his gloves, and whispered, "So they finally chose war." He didn't pack a bag. He didn't call anyone. He just walked, straight through the rusted hangar, into a locked room no one else knew existed. Inside was a ship not listed on any registry. Coated in dust, shaped like a broken sword, it was called the Revenant. The door opened with a hiss that sounded like a ghost breathing in. The lights flickered on, systems came online, and a low hum of power returned like a heart restarting. As he entered, the ship greeted him like an old friend. "Welcome back, Captain Raze," it said. He sat in the command chair, leaned back, and stared into the stars. "Plot a course to Vault Echo," he said. They woke the manual. Meanwhile, deep inside Earth's classified war archives, young strategist Mira Juno stared at the ancient war files. She had been studying them since she was 12. Now she was 27. But even she had never seen the folder labeled Manual Protocol Red Section. It was locked under triple clearance, known only to 3 humans alive. Until now, when her clearance activated automatically after the Varnok signal. Mira accessed it for the first time. Inside were blueprints, tactics, historical logs from battles that never officially happened. She read about operations where humans used sunlight to blind orbiting fleets or turned asteroid belts into minefields. Using timed magnetic bursts, these weren't just battles. They were lessons. Each one ended with the phrase, "Write the war you want them to fear." Mira's hands trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. She whispered to herself, "We don't just fight wars. We teach them." Back in Varnok space, Admiral Vosk examined the silence. No reply had come from Earth, not even a threat, and that silence was starting to worry him. His sensors showed something worse. The probe fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just missing, like it had been erased. "Send another squad," he ordered. But even as he spoke, something strange began happening to their long-range communication arrays. Static started to form images, human war maps, thousands of them, strategies layered over ancient star charts. Some of them showed Varnok territory, drawn years before the Varnok even discovered Earth. "How is this possible?" One officer cried. Vosk's voice cracked. "Because they've done this before." Aboard the Revenant, Captain Raze connected to a private neural channel. 3 figures appeared, virtual projections of the old War Council. "Are you certain?" One asked. "They sent the signal," Raze said calmly. "Now we send the teachers." "You know what that means," another whispered. "It means we're no longer defending. We're instructing," Raze finished. "The manual is open. At a human military base on Europa, new soldiers were being trained, but not with weapons. They were learning war theory, alien psychology, collapse tactics, emotional broadcasting. Each was assigned a section of the manual, not to read but to live. Their mission wasn't just to survive. It was to break the Varnok belief system. The galaxy had seen war before, but it had never seen war written like a book, where every chapter was a plan. Every plan was a trap, and every trap was a message. Humanity wasn't responding. It was preparing a lesson. One so brutal, so flawless, that no one would dare send a signal like that again. At Vault Echo, Mira met Raze in person for the first time. She expected a monster, a legend, a weapon. But what she saw was a tired man with fire still in his eyes. "You're real," she whispered, "and you're the future." He replied. She held up a datapad. "I've studied the manual all my life." Raze took it, glanced once, then smiled. "Good," he said. "Now forget it, because we're about to write a new chapter." And in the stars above, something ancient stirred. A ship once thought lost, now glowing with silent power. Its name, the Ember Knife. Its mission, demonstration, not domination. The teachers had returned, and class was about to begin. The first mistake was arrogance. The Varnok Empire had conquered 37 worlds before Earth. Each time, they gave the same warning. Each time, their enemies panicked, begged, or surrendered. They thought Earth would do the same. They were wrong, Admiral. Vosk stood in the war chamber, arms behind his back, watching as holograms flickered before him. Dozens of generals and priests filled the air with confidence. One shouted, "They haven't responded. Their silence is weakness." Another laughed, "They hide behind clouds, oceans, and primitive satellites." Vosk remained quiet, but his eyes narrowed at one screen. The fleet they sent to test Earth had vanished without a single distress ping. Still, they prepared the second strike. This time with a squadron of 12 destroyers, backed by the war cruiser Dread Fang. Their mission, destroy Earth's lunar outposts, jam communications, and orbit the planet as a warning. It was supposed to be simple. It wasn't. The destroyers approached the moon under stealth protocol. No resistance, no lights, no movement. They laughed over the comms, broadcasting mockery toward Earth. But suddenly, the lead ship's pilot screamed, "What is that? What is that?" Out of the dark side of the moon, massive railguns rose like towers from the soil, hidden for decades, buried beneath fake ice and outdated tech. They locked on not by heat or signal, but by heartbeat recognition. Each Varnok ship was tagged, tracked, and hit one by one before they could fire a single shot. It took exactly 13.2 seconds. After that, the moon fell silent again. Back on Earth, General Lee Voss stood in the command bunker, watching the feed in silence. Someone whispered, "Should we broadcast the footage?" Voss shook her head. "No, let the silence speak louder," she said. But just as the Varnok scrambled to understand what happened, a signal appeared. Not from Earth, not from the moon, from deep in space outside their own territory. A single human voice echoed across open channels. That was the tutorial. The Varnok Council went into emergency session. Admiral Vosk called it sabotage. Others called it magic. But one old priest, his skin lined with wisdom and scars, spoke quietly. "I warned you," he said. "I told you, Earth is not asleep. They're waiting, and we just gave them a reason to begin." On the edge of Saturn's orbit, the ship Revenant floated silently. Inside, Captain Raze sat beside Mira Juno, watching Varnok systems from a stolen satellite feed. "They still think this is about power," Mira said. Raze nodded. "It's not. It's about instruction." He tapped the console, and a screen showed the old manual training program. It wasn't about fighting harder. It was about making the enemy teach themselves fear. Every move Earth made was a message. Every silence was a lesson. And now the Varnok were enrolled. On Varnok Prime, chaos began to grow. Mothers pulled their children from public schools. Soldiers whispered about ghost ships and disappearing fleets. The word manual began to appear on pirate radio signals. No one knew what it meant, but they felt it deep in their bones. Back on Earth, Project Ember Knife was activated. It was not a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was a simulation fleet, a series of fake signals, broken ships, and drifting drones. its only job. Confuse, provoke, and bait. It appeared across Varnok borders like whispers, sometimes as ruins, sometimes as warnings written in Varnok language. Lesson 1. You were warned. Inside a classified room aboard the Revenant, Mira watched captured Varnok comms. She smiled as she saw this strategy fall apart. They're reacting emotionally, she said. Just like the manual predicted. Captain Raze chuckled softly. They always do, he replied. They start confident. They end confused, scared, and begging. On the Varnok fleet base in Sector K-12, one young officer sent an unauthorized signal to Earth. He simply asked, "What do you want?" The reply came seconds later. 4 words, burned into every ship's comm screen. To begin the lesson, Varnok analysts tried to break the pattern. But the truth was this: there was no pattern, because Earth wasn't fighting with weapons. Earth was fighting with knowledge, anticipation, and control. Earth was fighting like it had done this before, because it had. In secret wars, forgotten by history, written only in the manual, the first mistake the Varnok made was thinking they were superior. The second was talking to Earth like it was weak. The third was underestimating silence. And now the fourth was coming. And it would not be a mistake. It would be a memory, burned into the stars. Because this was not a war. This was a lesson. And Earth was the teacher. Lessons in fear. The Varnok Empire did not sleep that night. For the first time in centuries, fear touched their world like cold wind through armor. Their priests chanted louder. Their leaders held emergency meetings. But no one could explain what was happening, not fully, not clearly. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way Earth made them feel that silence, like a storm waiting behind a closed door. And each time they opened that door, it was empty. But the wind had changed. Admiral Vosk walked the war bridge of the Dread Fang. Eyes sunken, shoulders tight. He had seen many things in war explosions. Surrender, rebellion, but never this. This wasn't war. This was something colder. He stared at the outer rim displays, where a strange new pattern was forming. Old satellites were rebooting themselves, but not under Varnok control. Outposts that were once silent now echoed with strange Earth transmissions. Not in English, not in Varnok, but in raw emotion, grief, fury, sorrow, pride. Entire systems began broadcasting Earth's war archives, footage of cities burning, soldiers crawling through fire, mothers holding dying sons, not to brag, not to threaten, but to remind, to show the Varnok what humans survive. In Varnok schools, children accidentally accessed a simulation labeled Project Ember Feed. The program flooded their virtual reality lessons. Instead of math and history, they saw Earth's worst wars. Not fiction-recorded truth. They screamed, took off their headsets, and cried in the halls. Some even fainted. Parents demanded answers. The government said it was a virus, but one engineer whispered, "No virus thinks like that. No virus teaches like that." On Earth, Mira Juno stood in the memory core of Vault Echo. She had activated the Echo engine, a psychological warfare AI built not to destroy bodies, but beliefs. "It's working," she said softly, watching the Varnok's panic spread. They thought war was explosions, but the mind is the battlefield. Captain Raze joined her, arms crossed, his eyes locked on a flickering screen. "They're remembering things they never lived," he said. "That's fear." In Varnok command centers, soldiers stopped sleeping. Their dreams were filled with Earth's wars replayed in terrifying detail. The battles weren't exaggerated. In fact, they were real, too real. The Varnok High Priest, Kal Zur, issued a command to shut all external data streams. But it was too late. The fear had already entered, not as fire but as memory, on the outer planet of Varnok's far colony. A commander received a package. No ship had landed, no drone had flown. It was just there on his desk. Wrapped in black, inside was a book. The cover read, Human War Manual, Chapter 4, Collapse of Confidence. He threw it into the fire. It didn't burn. Back aboard the Revenant, Mira watched intercepted Varnok broadcasts. Soldiers questioning their orders, commanders asking for guidance. One even begged on air, "What do they want from us?" She whispered the answer. Fear. But not fear of death, fear of knowing. That humans had prepared this, that they had seen this war before it even started, that they had written every response like a chess game with no escape. Captain Raze smiled. They're starting to understand. Understand what? Mira asked. That we don't just win wars, Raze said. We design them. A strange new signal appeared in the Varnok's core systems. It bypassed firewalls, ignored defenses, and played only one line. Lesson 2. Never fight the ones who never stopped fighting. Varnok youth began painting symbols they saw in the hallucinations. Symbols that matched ancient Earth military logos. No one told them to. They just remembered them, like dreams etched in the stars. In a last act of desperation, the Varnok fleet fired missiles toward Earth's outer colonies. But the missiles never reached their targets. They were intercepted mid-flight, not by ships, but by reflected satellite beams, rerouted through old orbital mirrors. It wasn't firepower. It was knowledge used like a blade. The Varnok High Council issued one command, full retreat. But even as their ships turned, a voice echoed. On every channel, it was a child's voice, human. Calm and kind. Class is not over yet, it said, back on Earth. Mira watched the chaos with a heavy heart. Do they deserve this? She asked. Raze replied, They wanted war. We gave them a manual. What they do with it. Is their lesson to learn? And across the galaxy, every Varnok station began displaying the same message. Lesson 3 begins now. The Ghost Fleet returns. The Varnok Empire once believed they knew every human ship ever built. They had studied Earth's war records, analyzed fleet sizes, and even stolen ship blueprints. But what they didn't know was this. Not every ship Earth-built was recorded. Some were built not to be used, but to be remembered. In the icy silence beyond Neptune's orbit, something stirred. A ripple passed through dark space where no star shone. Then another, and another, until eyes-old. Cameras long believed dead opened once more. The Ghost Fleet had no official name. Even Earth's leaders only whispered of it in legend. They were ships without flags, without home ports. They had no crews, only missions. These were vessels abandoned on purpose, hidden in gravity shadows, buried beneath asteroid fields, sunk into moons. They were forgotten by design, because they weren't meant to fight a war. They were meant to end one, back aboard the Revenant. Mira stared in disbelief as more than 30 vessels activated without command. Her hands shook. These ships weren't in the manual. Captain Raze leaned forward, his voice low. That's because they were never part of the lesson. They are the consequence. The first Ghost Fleet strike came without a sound. A Varnok dreadnought orbiting the gas giant Zakar was torn in half by a beam of light, so thin it looked like a thread. No explosion, no warning, just a quiet end. Varnok Command tried to retaliate. They fired into empty space, locked missiles. On to shadows, but the Ghost Fleet was never there, not in the places they looked. The ships moved like phantoms, faster than thought. Every system they entered collapsed in minutes. Aboard the Varnok war bridge, Admiral Vosk screamed, "This isn't war, it's haunting." And he wasn't wrong. Every Ghost Fleet vessel carried an AI built from fallen soldiers, memories, personalities, and battlefield instincts. Each ship fought like it remembered every mistake and refused to repeat them. One Varnok scout intercepted a ship drifting in silence. Its hull read, "Uns Obsidian." Rain. He scanned the ship, no crew. No heat, no power. He approached slowly, But before he could send a signal, the ship's hull split open like a mouth, and a voice whispered through his ship's speakers. "You left us to rust. Now we return to remind you." Then the screen went black. In the Empire's heart world, people no longer watched the news. They listened for silence, because silence meant a ghost was near, on Earth. Mira gathered with the final branch of the War Mind Council. They were all silent veterans. Scarred and cold, she asked, "Why didn't we use them before?" One old colonel answered, "Because once you call them, they don't go back," Raze added. "They're not ships. They're warnings made metal." In the skies above the Varnok capital, the stars blinked, not from light but from movement. Dozens of unknown objects entered orbit. They didn't fire. They didn't move. They just watched. Every screen in the city blinked to black, then showed only 4 words. "We remember the silence?" The Varnok Empire sent their best fleet, their final hope. They called it the Warlord Armada. Built with fear, powered by desperation, they launched it directly at Earth. But when the fleet reached the edge of Sol System, it found no resistance. Just a recording, floating in space. It played a message. You were brave to come here. But bravery, without understanding, leads only to extinction. Suddenly, one by one, their ships began shutting down. Engines failed, weapons jammed, life support dropped. Each had been tagged long ago by tiny particles carried through data, dust, and space. Planted by human patience, the Ghost Fleet didn't just destroy. They waited, they watched, and when the time came, they ended. On the surface of Earth, no fireworks lit the sky. No victory speeches were given. Captain Raze stood quietly on a cliff near the ocean. Mira approached him and asked, "Was this the plan from the beginning?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "This was the reminder. The war manual taught them pain. But the Ghost Fleet teaches regret." Far above them, the Ghost Fleet drifted quietly, waiting for the next species foolish enough to speak to Earth in threats. And their message was always the same. "You started this. We were only waiting to finish it." When the manual becomes a weapon, they thought the manual was just a collection of strategies, just plans, maps, and old human tactics. They never realized the manual itself was the weapon. Inside the core systems of the Varnok Empire, files began appearing, not explosions, not viruses, just simple human files, pages, pages, and more pages, labeled Lesson 4, Collapse of Trust. Lesson 5, Internal Erosion. Lesson 6, Implosion by Design. The Varnok first thought it was a trick, but then their commanders began turning on each other. One admiral executed 3 officers, claiming they were human sympathizers. Another blew up his own supply station, believing it was infiltrated by Earth's code. But Earth had sent no code, only ideas, whispers wrapped in data, suggestions that seeded doubt, and fear made the rest grow like fire. At Vault Echo, Mira stood beside Captain Raze as a new signal arrived. This one wasn't from Earth. It was from the Varnok Empire itself, a public transmission from their capital. One general, trembling, holding a copy of the Human War Manual on screen. "This is not just a book," he said. "This is a map of our destruction. Everything we do is written in here." Behind him, fires burned in the streets. His capital was falling. Not from invasion, but from understanding. On the Revenant, Raze remained silent. He knew this part of the manual better than anyone, not because he wrote it, but because he lived it. Years ago, Earth had tested the concept on its self-simulated collapse, and now they were applying it to a species that thought emotions were weaknesses. But humans had studied emotion like it was a tactical weapon. And fear, guilt, memory, these were Earth's artillery. Back in the Varnok archives, scholars began finding human phrases etched into their own encrypted texts, not planted predicted. Earth had calculated how the Varnok would think, how they would respond, and how to break them from the inside. Even Varnok children began having visions. They dreamed of human cities, of burning skies, of steel soldiers with faces like mirrors. One child screamed in class, "The teacher has no eyes." No one knew what it meant, but the children did. They had never met humans, but they remembered them. The dreams spread like a disease. Doctors tried neural blockers. Priests held cleansing rituals. Nothing worked, because this wasn't infection. This was impression. Earth had not invaded the body. It had invaded the story on Earth. Mira walked through a hallway full of old portraits. Each person on the wall had helped write the manual. Generals, psychologists, even poets. The manual is alive, she said quietly. It learns, adapts, evolves. Captain Raze replied, "No, it doesn't evolve. It waits." Back on Varnok Prime, the ruling council made one final effort. They launched Project Purity, a global shutdown of all external signals. They wanted silence, but they didn't understand. Silence was Earth's favorite language. When the purge began, every screen in the Empire went black. For 7 minutes, there was nothing. No war, no noise, no instructions. Just black. Then a single image appeared on every wall, every screen, every mind-linked device. It was not a weapon. It was not a ship. It was the first page of the manual, and at the bottom of that page, in bold human text, were 5 words. "You are always." The lesson. Across the Empire, people stopped moving. They understood. This wasn't about revenge. It was about demonstration. They had been part of a class they never enrolled in. And Earth had been the quiet teacher in the back of the room. Now, the lesson was ending, and the grade was already written. Back aboard the Revenant, Mira stood by the window, watching the stars shift. She asked, "Is it over?" Raze replied, "No, the manual doesn't end. It just waits for the next one who thinks we've forgotten how to teach." And somewhere beyond the stars, a blank page opened, waiting to be filled, because Earth didn't just fight wars anymore, authored them, and the manual was still being written. The last lesson: no missiles fired, no ships landed, and yet the Varnok Empire fell, not to power, not to death, but to understanding. The stars above Varnok Prime were calm now, but calm didn't mean safe. Calm was the sound of final realization, and it settled across the Empire like a cold blanket. For days, the people waited for Earth's next move, but nothing came, no fleet, no ambassador, only silence, and silence meant one thing now. The lesson was complete in the Varnok High Council chamber. Only 5 members remained. The others had resigned, vanished, or gone mad. They sat in silence, staring at a single book on the table. Its cover was black. No title, no author. Just a single emblem, a broken star surrounded by flames. It was the final edition of the Human War Manual, delivered not by ship, but by an encrypted signal decoded into paper by their own printers. The last chapter was titled The Mirror Test. Inside, it did not speak of humans. It spoke of them, their arrogance, their hunger, their refusal to listen. And then, on the last page, one sentence waited like a whisper. "You chose war, and we chose the lesson elsewhere." On a quiet ridge overlooking the ruins of a human training facility, Captain Raze stood alone. His ship, the Revenant, hovered quietly behind him. Engines powered down. Mira Juno approached, her boots crunching softly against broken stone. "They've gone quiet," she said. Raze nodded slowly. "They're not just quiet," he said. "They're thinking." She handed him a small chip. "Final transmission from Varnok," she said. He slid it into his wristpad, watched the message play. It was a child's drawing, scanned and sent across the stars. Picture of Earth, smiling, and beside it, a Varnok child holding a flower. Raze smiled for the first time in years. "No blood," he whispered. "No threats. Just memory." Mira looked at him, eyes questioning. Is this ... forgiveness? Raze shook his head. No, he said. It's awareness. We didn't destroy them, he continued. We let them see themselves. Through us. In the Varnok capital, statues of generals were taken down. Not out of shame, but out of understanding. And in their place, they built something strange. A circle of empty chairs, each one facing a bookstand, and on every stand, a printed page of the manual, not to worship, but to remember across the young. Galaxy, the message spread. Earth teaches differently, not with fire, but with fear, not with pain, but with clarity. On a distant planet, once used by the Varnok as a weapons depot, the last Ghost Fleet ship powered down. Its mission complete, its memory saved, and the AI inside whispered as its systems dimmed. Lesson delivered. Back on Earth, Mira walked the hall of doctrine, where the manual's pages were carved into crystal walls. Students walked beside. Her younger minds full of questions. One asked, why didn't we take over their empire? She stopped, turned, and said, because this wasn't about control. It was about consequence. Captain Raze watched from afar. He had written the first pages. Mira had written the last, and together they understood the one truth Earth had kept hidden until it was needed. Victory isn't when your enemy is gone. Victory is when your enemy never wants to become you again. And so the galaxy turned, and Earth remained quiet, not feared because of what it could do, but feared because of what it had already done. The stars no longer mocked Earth. Now they listened, because somewhere, hidden in the dark, the manual still waited, not as a threat, but as a reminder that humanity never needed to start wars, only teach them.